Thank you so much, Drew, Blessed, for a magnificent poem, and Natalie for that inspirational discussion of her life and its connection to what this magnificent program has helped her become and be for us. There are two great global events occurring this year, this month, this week. One of them demonstrates excellence of skill and ability to the highest level imaginable. It shows a demonstration of inspirational performances that evoke awe and delight in all of us. It supports and boosts global awareness and participation among different cultures, different countries, and different citizens. But enough of the International Baccalaureate Conference of the Americas. Let us for a moment also think about the World Cup of Soccer in Brazil and the final that is to come in a few days, and that I'm so relieved does not conflict with my keynote speech at this particular point in time. I've been asked to speak to you, with you today, about leadership. All of you here are leaders. You may be leaders of big people, of other adults. You may be leaders of your colleagues, also big people and adults. And you may be leaders of little people in your classrooms of all different ages, some of the hardest and most challenging leadership of all. Leaders all amongst you, I'd like you to think of the following three questions, and if you were one of these leaders, what you would do. Imagine that you are the CEO of a company, global company, that has just gone through 17 straight quarters in the red, and 40,000 jobs are at stake worldwide, in Europe, in Brazil, in other places as well. What would you do? Imagine if you're the leaders of a small town, textile town, football team, soccer team in Northern England, whose entire population would fit into the stadium of Manchester United. And you promise your people that for your club and community, you will shortly ascend into the Premier League of English soccer, the greatest global brand in sport. What would you do? Imagine if you are the leader of a developing country and you promise your people that within a single generation they will transform this country from being a developed country to one of the leading global economies with a higher GDP per capita than places like the United States of America, and that you will achieve that through education. How would you persuade your people you are not utterly insane? How would you persuade your people to follow you? These are the questions that my colleagues Alan Boyle, Alma Harris, and myself asked several years ago when we began a program of work to study more than 15 organizations with unusually high performance you would really not expect given their circumstances, on 4 continents, in 8 countries, across 3 sectors of business, sport, and education. These were the sorts of leadership issues that the heads of the organizations and all the people around them had confronted in the organizations that they examined. And when they did this, they hid a little controller that controls the PowerPoint presentation So I have no idea where they have put it, but I think it's down here. Here it goes. So what was the answer? What was the answer? When we looked at all these cases, all these instances of leadership across different parts of the world in different sectors, what did the answer come down to? It came down to 2 letters. It sounds like a competition for Blessed's magnificent poem. It came down to 1 word, 2 letters, a preposition. Up. Up as a preposition is far more interesting than its 2-lettered, uninteresting, boring neighbors like in, on, at, or by, that sound like an old-fashioned Latin lesson that we have all forgotten. Up is more than a preposition. Up is about a place we want to be, a destination we want to go, a direction in which we want to travel. This is my grandson, the grandson of my wife and I. My wife may even be here. I hope she's hiding. This is Jackson Jianjie Hargreaves Lim. Jackson Jianjie Hargreaves Lim is Chinese, Malaysian, Singaporean, English, Canadian. He is an IB student waiting to happen. And when in English you say up to Jackson, as you do in English to all babies, what Jackson immediately does, he knows. Up his arms go like this, because you say up to Jackson and it's visceral. It's emotionally visceral. When you say up, it's a place he wants to be that is more secure, loved, caring, interesting, and exciting than where he already is. It's a simple word, but it carries a lot of weight, because up is uplifting. And when we feel uplifted, what is it that we feel? To be uplifted is about your performance. It's uplifting when you perform better than you used to do before, because achieving your goal, achieving your results is one of the most inspiring things that there is. To be uplifting is about your people, to raise your people, to lift them back up when they have fallen, become disappointed, or don't believe that they can achieve their goals. To be uplifted is to uplift yourself. By uplifting other people, we also uplift ourselves. The two are absolutely connected. To be uplifted is about our behavior, about what we do. To be uplifted when we are inspired by Nelson Mandela or the Mother Teresa, by all these examples of incredibly uplifting leadership from other people, what we feel is an emotional and spiritual change, just as we do when we listen to magnificent music. But uplift is also social. When we talk about uplift, we talk about changes in people's opportunities, changes in their life chances, transformations in their quality of life, because in this sense, the origins of the idea of uplift are in this country. They are African American. They are the struggle for fairness, for the end of racism, for the increase of opportunity through work, through learning, through education, through the collective and determined desire for something greater, better, and more just than communities already have. These are the key ideas of uplift. When we talk about leadership, we have adjectives that go before it, but very few connect what it is that we are leading. The improvement in opportunities of other people to the way we should lead, the way we inspire other people around us. And this is essentially what uplifting leadership does. Uplift is a journey. I have a small space to show it to you, but it goes like this. So leadership, we often talk about competencies, about skills, about things we need to know, checklists we take off. But true leadership is about the connections between those skills and competencies. It's not just the dots, it's the way we join the dots. Leadership is a journey. Communities follow a journey. Leadership is the capacity to articulate that journey. It begins from a safe and secure place, a firm foundation where we begin. It envisions a destination that is more interesting, inspiring, desirable than the place we already are. And then it takes off towards that destination, not with the wind behind it, not with everything in your favor, but it takes off against the wind, using the forces that oppose you, the things that resist you, as an advantage to inspire you to reach further to the destination that is important. And as you go along the way, you need navigational tools to know you're on course, to know how far you've reached, to make sure you don't veer off away from what's most important to you. And when you take off, it's important that when you fuel up, you have enough fuel and you don't burn out everything you have, all your energy, all your resources, and by metaphorical comparison, all your people before you've got to the place that matters to you. This is the idea of uplift. It's a journey, and we'll see it's a journey that brings things together that other people put apart. It's both and, not either or. So what do we learn from these organizations? They are, like many of you, places that do a lot better than they used to before. Drew gave some magnificent examples. Schools and other organizations that do a lot with a little, with few resources, little support. Communities that seem to have not much going for them. They're places that do better than a lot of people like you working in similar circumstances. And in some cases, they are places like the IB itself in 1968 that created something from nothing. There was nothing, and then there was one school, and now there are thousands, almost 2,000 alone, within the whole of North America. Most huge ideas begin in a very tiny place, before which was nothing at all. And one of the great challenges of leadership is how to envision that in the future. So, let's begin, before I share 6 criteria with you of uplifting leadership, with what we didn't find in our organizations. This is the time where your conscience should prick you, where some may feel slightly uncomfortable, where you've asked questions of who leads you or how you may have led before. This is what uplifting leadership doesn't do. Uplifting leadership does not race to the top as fast as you can. It does not want to be number one or best in class for its own sake. It does not want to be as big as it can be as a value in itself. This is not what uplifting leadership is. Uplifting leadership doesn't go and visit others and then copy exactly what they have done. It does not follow exactly the paths that others have laid before, because if you do, the most you can hope for is that you'll get as far as they did. It does not look at the competition around it and decide that its job is to vanquish all its enemies, to eliminate all its competitors, to stand alone and lonely in its outstanding superior brilliance. This is not what uplifting leadership is. Uplifting leaders don't obsess about data. They're not just tied to spreadsheets and dashboards. But they don't ignore data altogether, thinking it's all about intuition and just what you know from your experience. Uplifting leaders do not fire the lowest 10% of their employees every year to keep people on their toes and lacking complacency, like Jack Welch at GE. GE did many years ago. What the research now says, by the way, is that the Jack Welch philosophy of firing certain proportions of people every year is not applicable to values-driven organizations. Not applicable to values-driven organizations. And lastly, uplifting leaders don't focus only on the next victory, only on quarterly returns, only on the immediate set of test results at the expense of long-term growth, development, and sustainability. This is what uplifting leaders and uplifting leadership don't do in education, in business, and in sports. So what do they do? Here's an advanced organizer. I'll show you 6. We're going to talk about 4. If you want the other 2, buy the book. And from September, this is my cheap way of selling books, which is I only tell people 2/3 of what's in it. But if you go to any Hudson's News store in any airport, major airport in America, from September, you'll be able to buy it in Hudson's News. Hopefully other places as well for people who don't fly, but that's where you'll be able to pick it up. So here's an advanced organizer. Here's all 6. If you want to be an uplifting leader, you need an improbable dream that isn't just an idle wish, but that you pursue with relentless determination, at great cost sometimes, and despite all obstacles. Uplifting leadership does not follow what other people have done. It is creative. It goes against the flow, against the grain. It does what others do not expect. It works by surprise. Uplifting leadership is not about collaboration or competition. It's how you combine collaboration with competition, indeed often how you collaborate with your competitors in business, in sport, and in education. Uplifting leadership is about pulling people into change. The definition of a team in 15th century Northern Frisian means that which draws or pulls like a team of horses or oxen. Pulling people into change, intriguing them, enthusing them, inspiring them, appealing to them, drawing them towards you over time. This is one way to change. The other is to push them, to get them into a zone of discomfort, to ask them, sometimes more than ask them, to try something they've not done before they decide whether it's not worth it. Uplifting leaders don't just pull change like consultants or push change hierarchically. They push and pull together as a team. 5th, uplifting leaders use data, but data that reflects what they value, and a wide range of data, not just using data that is easily available, that's nothing to do or little to do with what you value. They measure with meaning. The two go together. And last, uplifting leaders don't choose between the short term and the long term, between quick wins and long-term growth. John Maynard Keynes said, in the long term, we're all dead. So you need to focus on the short term as well as the long term. But the point is, as business professor John Cotter said, to see the connections between the two for yourself and for the people around you, that your short-term achievements are coherently connected to your long-term goals, not a distraction from them. We're going to talk about 4 of these with some examples. The other 2, you'll need to buy the book. So, let's begin with number 1. On a late August day in this city, by the reflecting pool, just over 50 years ago, Martin Luther King did not say, I have a set of key performance indicators. Here they are. He did not even say, I have a strategic plan. He did have a plan, of course. But before the plan comes the dream. And the dream is an utterly improbable dream. And one embodiment of that dream is this President of the United States at this particular point in time. Utterly improbable, absolutely achievable, because that is the point of a dream. The point of a dream is when you articulate it at first. People don't say, great, fantastic, let's go there. That people say at first, are you crazy? Are you crazy? Imagine your dream is this. The company that had just gone through 17 straight quarters in the red in 2004 was Fiat Motors. In 2004, Fiat Motors was no longer even selling cars to Americans. There was no market, there were no dealers in America for Fiat because the vehicles were so ugly and so unreliable. Fiat, F-I-A-T, stood for Fix It Again Tomorrow. So, you've no market, you've no dealers in North America. You take over this ancient Italian company and you say to all the people who work for you, they say, okay, Sergio Marchionne, what's your solution then? How are you going to turn things around? And he says, we're going to impose small energy efficient cars on the North American market. And do you imagine that they said, fantastic, that makes a lot of sense. We'll go there right away. No dealers, no market. Americans buy big cars, not small cars. This January, after first forming a partnership several years ago, Fiat took over Chrysler Motors. Buy a Chrysler, you're buying a Fiat. Basically, now they are one and the same. The point of an improbable dream is its improbability, not just for its own sake, but because here, it's not just saying we want to be number one, the biggest, the best, but there's a prime value. The value is an ethical value as well as an economic value. The point is to reduce waste to zero, which achieves both purposes at the same time. What is your improbable dream for your school? How will you go about achieving it? What would you be prepared to give up or to sacrifice? Your time, your vacations, your sleep, sometimes your families, in order to achieve those particular dreams. That's the question, because the dream is the place where you begin. In America, the teachers' unions have got a bit of a thrashing lately. For good or bad, whatever you agree with it, this is the phenomenon. The California Teachers Association is one of those unions, the union for the largest state, over 40 million people in North America, in the United States. Several years ago, the California Teachers Association sued Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger for over $2 million for failing to provide opportunities to learn for some of the poorest and underserved children in California because the budget was moved to core funding for the whole of the budget. The union won its lawsuit. What did it do with this more than $2 billion that it achieved? It could have handed it out and shared it above its members, but instead, it decided with partners to write legislation where it, the union and its members, would be responsible for turning around hundreds of the lowest performing schools in California against a matched sample of schools in which they did not intervene. Extraordinary. Their first battle was with Governor Schwarzenegger. Their bigger battle was inside the Union as to what is the destiny, the future, the vision, the purpose of this professional association of teachers, which is to serve its students and to help them learn more effectively, especially where they are most underserved. And those schools, by the measure of the annual performance index, are now improving at around 2% a year, steadily in large numbers, through the change led by the Union, with the biggest gains for African American and Hispanic populations. It's important to have a dream. It's important to fight for that dream and to pursue it with determination. How do you doggedly, determinedly pursue your dreams with the people around you? And then, when I show you this picture, and I'm going to count down from 3 seconds, 3 to 1, and then I want you to shout out one word that this picture evokes for you. 3, 2, 1. Wow. You're better paid than I thought. In 2006, Burberry, the luxury clothing company, was moving along at a glacial pace compared to most of its high-end competitors. This British company, over 150 years old, with royal appointment to the Queen, was taken over as CEO by Angela Arendt, a Midwesterner from Illinois, the most unlikely combination you can possibly imagine. Angela Arendt went to her first meeting in London, and all her executives came in, and it was a typical rainy London day. And Angela looked around her, and she was puzzled. And the reason she was puzzled was that really the thing that Burberry is most famous for is a thing called the trench coat. The trench coat. And when she looked around her, she realized Burberry was now producing so many things, like those schools that do so many innovations, they forget what their core value is, that nobody was wearing the thing that Burberry was most famous for. When Burberry started, one of the first things it created looked like this. The greatcoat that became a trench coat that officers in the First World War used to wear when they went to fight. Roald Amundsen was wearing his Burberry when he went to the South Pole. George Mallory, in his failed attempt of Everest, was seen wearing his Burberry the last time he was moving towards the top. This is what a Burberry used to look like. So Angela Arendt sat down with all the people, and they'd done a bit of customer surveys. And they worked out who was the new market for Burberry and for luxury items. The new market for luxury items were young Asian women, many of whom shopped online. So Burberry became the first luxury company. The idea of luxury was personalized one-to-one service. But they were the first company, luxury, to do online marketing and selling to young women in Asia. The focus was on the Burberry. The executives said, going back to trench coats, we must be crazy. This is the future? No, this is the future. It's still a trench coat. Just. You wouldn't go and fight the enemy in it, but it coherently, this is key thing, it coherently connects the future of what you want to be to the past, the best of what you've been before. And this is another key thing about an inspiring dream. How do you as a leader articulate the core values of your dream that connect what you want to be with the best of who you used to be. You don't ignore the past and you don't repeat the past, but you create a narrative that connects the two. What's your narrative that connects your future to the best of what you've been before? And last, on this first one, is no picture, but an English soccer club called Burnley Football Club, who this year are going into the English Premier League for the second time in 5 years. They in the league below had fewer resources than most of their competitors. And they had one of two teams that had the smallest squad of players because they couldn't afford any more. But they're going up into the Premier League. And so is another team with the smallest squad of players, compared to clubs with vast amounts of money who spent millions on new players. Their weakness was that they had the smallest squad of players. Their strength is that they had the smallest squad of players. Because you're the leader, and you know if you don't like somebody, you can't just fire them and put somebody else there instead. You've got to work with what you've got. If you have to work with what you've got, you focus on what you've got. You grow your own people, you grow your own talent, you grow your own leadership. You don't get fed up and bored too quickly and think, they're gone now, let's have somebody else. What is your biggest challenge? What is your greatest obstacle? What is your most enormous problem? And how do you convert that into your greatest triumph? This is one of the great things about leadership. To take a district where nobody wants to go to the schools, to becoming a district where people outside are begging to go to your schools. How do you do this? So this is what we've learned. These are the questions for you about your dream. These are the questions for you. Here we go. What is your dream? How improbable is it? Because if everybody says yes immediately, it's not challenging enough, not inspiring enough. Who can share it with you? The secret of leadership is not to bring a dream from nowhere, but to pull it out of something that is somehow already there. What would you give up to achieve it? How does it connect the future to the past? And then, how does it become the opposite of what you might expect? Ivan Hoft has written a book called How Weak Armies Win Wars. Strong armies win wars by copying the strategies of their opponents and using them with greater force and might. Weak armies win wars by doing something their opponents don't expect, by catching them out by surprise. I am one of the very few people in this room with a British accent. And there's a good reason for that, because a little while ago in Concord, Massachusetts, British soldiers stood up in a field challenging the colonists to come out and fight like men. They stood in their red uniforms, looking impressive, organized, fearsome. They stood in a line. They stood in a field. And they dared the colonists to come out and face them. And what did those sneaky colonists do? They didn't put on uniforms. They hid behind trees. They moved somewhere else when they were shot at. They would not fight the British on their own terms. And had they not done that, you'd all have British accents now. So luckily for me, I'm about the only person in here with a British accent, which makes me sound a little bit smarter than I actually am. So, what are some other examples of this counterintuitive thinking, doing the opposite of what people would expect. This is Singapore. Singapore, a few years ago, wanted to be a world-class city. World-class city isn't a vague aspiration. There are some clear indicators of being a world-class city. One of them, bizarrely, is that you have to have Formula One racing. Otherwise, you are not counted as being a world-class city. So Singapore decided it would run Formula One. And they were all up and ready. And then somebody said, hang on a minute, there's a bit of a problem here. Because if we run Formula One, all the world who's watching it are going to be asleep. So there'll be no media benefits whatsoever. So we can't do it. And then somebody said, that's okay, we'll run it at night. They said, what, you're crazy? Formula One, boom, high speed at night? So they put on Formula One at night, they run it in the business district. It goes past all these lit up buildings that show off the spectacle of Singapore, which is by far its best at night, for those of you who've been there. And it's needed the determination of new visors, new lighting, and so on. Singapore took its biggest problem, we can't run it during the day, and turned it into its greatest triumph, how to do it at night. And it was just as creative with its educational system. In the 1990s, Singapore topped the world scores in the International Maths and Science Studies with a standardized curriculum and extensive standardized testing related to it. And at just this moment, the leaders of Singapore said, the world is changing, it's becoming more technological. Our traditional electronics industry is not going to keep us going. So we need to change what we're doing. A test of counterintuitive thinking is when you're at the peak of performance is when you have to change it. That's the paradox. Just when you're at your best is when you need to change into something else because things are changing around you. You cannot persist as you are. So Singapore said, right, we're going to have our education system now will be about the test of life, not a life of tests. So before the end of high school, 16, they have one test, age 11. That's all, period. It's the only standardized test there is. The leading nation on the international PISA tests in the world. And then they said, we'll do another thing. Teach less, learn more. Teach less, learn more. Not be lazy, take time off, but give more space for the learning. So 20% or so of the curriculum in Singapore now is white space, which means the teacher creates curriculum in response to and with the students' learning. At the peak of their achievement was when they decided to change up and go into something else, and that is how they've stayed ahead. That is counterintuitive thinking. Okay, I'm going to ask you what this is. 3, 2, 1. Two things about a Dyson that are important. First, Dyson took the thing that all other vacuum cleaners was the thing everybody wanted to hide, which was dirt. Dirt's disgusting, we don't like it, so we put gloves on. We hide the dirt inside an opaque bag. We remove the bag, we put it inside another bag, we put that bag inside the garbage. This is what vacuum cleaners had always done. Dyson said, phew, enough of that. We're going to put it in a transparent container, everybody can see the dirt, and we'll turn the dirt into entertainment because it will fly around at 400 miles an hour. And people will clean their houses instead of watching cable TV because it's more exciting. That's the first thing. It turned upside down what people thought vacuum cleaners were supposed to do. Second thing about Dyson is how many prototypes it had before it went to market. This is the answer. So, Alan November will be talking to you in a couple of days, and I'm sure he won't recommend this, which is when you put technology into your schools, put it in all at once and make it unavoidable and irreversible. Because if you do, you'll be like the first prototype of the Dyson. The problem is, with the Dyson, only the dirt suffers. In a school, your kids suffer. If you have a bad innovation that's not been tested, tried, worked out, trialed, perfected, 1, 2, 3, all cohorts of children will suffer as a result because your innovation is indisciplined. It's not tested. So be a Dyson. Try your technology or any other innovation with some of the children, some of the time, on some of the things, for some of the teaching. Check out how it goes. Refine it, perfect it, then spread it out to more kids, more of the curriculum, because otherwise you'll lose whole cohorts of kids. This is what Jim Collins calls disciplined innovation. Innovation's not just about wacky ideas, see how they go. It's about perfecting them with relentless discipline. This is counterintuitive thinking. So, what do we conclude here? First, what are your opportunities that others have missed that you can take up in curriculum, in learning? I work in a Catholic university. Catholic education was a few years ago, for reasons we all know, one of the most broken brands in America. For financial reasons and for ethical reasons, for both. It's a major challenge here, reinventing Catholic education. Last week, I worked with teams from Catholic schools all across America whose focus is bilingual immersion instruction for Hispanic immigrant students. Something they have taken an opportunity that others have missed, entirely consistent with its traditional vision, but invented in an utterly new way. What are your opportunities that others have missed? When you see resistance and people oppose you, do you run away from it, or do you say, that's interesting, what can we learn from it? How can that motivate us? What's your greatest weakness? How do you turn it into your most monumental triumph? And what does it mean? What does it really mean? Not just to throw stuff in and see how it goes, but to test it out in a disciplined way with your colleagues. And one example of this, one example of counterintuitive thinking, is how to collaborate with your competitors. It seems utterly improbable, but here is an example of how to do it. In America, Dogfish Head beer, it's hard to say, but easier to drink, is one of the most successful microbreweries or craft breweries. It's been on the Discovery Channel, breakfast, morning television, and so on. It's fun and funky. It's against the grain. The person who invented it and the people around him throw random objects into the beer to see how it changes the taste. They've taken, through an archaeologist, the most ancient recipes of Egyptian and Chinese beer and reinvented them. They connect the future to the past. The atmosphere is fun and funky to work with. And their major competitor, Sierra Ales, they produced a joint beer with Sierra Ales because their passion for alternative beers among them is greater than the competition between them. What shared passion do you have with your competitors, your other schools, for the community that you hold in common, or the learning that you value together? And if that sounds abstract, let me take you, not to Singapore, but to the London borough of Hackney. In 2002, Hackney was the worst performing local authority school district in England. It ranked 149th out of 149. It's got one of the highest rates of unemployment in the country, a highly impoverished population. 10 years later, Hackney performs above the national average with the same population, the same kids. Many reasons for this. A learning trust took over Hackney, and the head, when he took it over, said counterintuitive. Many people said they were ashamed to work in Hackney. They didn't like to tell people where they did their job. It was a wreck. And he said to them, in a few years, you will go out and you will say how proud you are to work in Hackney. People will look up to you because you work in Hackney. People will beg to come and work and be educated in Hackney. And now they do. And one of the reasons is in Hackney, unlike the borough next door, they have many academies like charter schools in the US. Very controversial. Many academies, many charter-like schools. But if you want to become an academy in Hackney, there are two conditions. One is you have to have a record as a sponsor of your commitment to Hackney as a community. You can't just swan in from the outside and want to set up a school to make a profit. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you become a principal ahead of a school in Hackney, it's in your contract that you must also help the other schools in Hackney. You are responsible to all the children of Hackney, not just to the children in your school. These other schools are your competitors. Parents will choose between them, but by contract, you are obliged to collaborate with your competitors. And principals often do. You'll be head of a failing school, you'll turn it around, and then somebody else, and then they'll say, can you take over this school as well that's also failing? Can you be principal of two schools? You'll get more money, you'll also, on salary, and you'll get money to replace people behind you so they build up capacity behind you. Then you become principal of 3 schools, 4 schools. It's like building a district from the bottom rather than imposing it from the top. And the reason is not a chain or a brand. It's the children of Hackney. And you collaborate with your competitors because they matter more than anything else. So for you, in what is called co-opetition, the combination of collaboration and competition, a business term with devised by a Harvard and Yale professor. Do you collaborate with others for mutual advantage, and what do you collaborate on? Do you collaborate with others, even your competitors, for a higher purpose that transcends you all? And as Singapore does, people in Singapore, this is the interesting one. Do you do what they do and give away your best ideas? Because that will make you have to keep inventing new ones. If you give away your best ideas, that will make you have to keep inventing new ones. Collaborating and giving away keeps you kind of on your toes and ahead of the game. That's the paradox. What's the fourth thing? The fourth thing is measuring with meaning. Here are the Vancouver Giants hockey team. Not the Vancouver Canucks, but the Giants. They're arguably the best team in minor or junior hockey. Milan Lucic of the Boston Bruins comes from the Vancouver Giants. We talked to all kinds of people in the Vancouver Giants, including Michael Bublé, who owns the Giants' sister. I haven't shaken hands with Michael Bublé, but I've shaken the hands of his sister, and that's good enough for me. The other owner of the Vancouver Giants has a restaurant chain. It's called Ron Toigo. I asked Ron how he got into owning the Giants, and he said, well, first of all, I had a lot of money. I like hockey. I thought I'd buy a hockey team. So I bought one several hours' drive south of here. I said, how was it? He said, it's a disaster. Why was it a disaster? I asked, and he said, because basically I just owned a hockey team because I could. I had no connection to the community. I had no stake in what they were doing. Whenever we failed, we just tried buying a new player. It was hopeless, so I gave it up. And instead, I came to Vancouver, my hometown, and I set up a minor hockey team in the only city where there is an NHL pro team. Technically, they compete, but together they raise the status and interest in hockey for the whole city, and everybody benefits. I said, what kind of team are you? And the coach, the captain, all of them said, we're not the most skillful team, we're not the fastest team, we are the Vancouver Giants. We bang and hit a lot. We outlast every other team because we're just more persistent. Bit like US women's hockey and Canadian women's hockey in the Olympics, if you watched that. Not quite Brazil, but, you know, you play to the last minute. In everything, you play to the last minute. So we said, how do you know? How do you know? What's your evidence? Said a couple of things. First, we score more goals in overtime than any other team. Second, blocked shots. What's a blocked shot, I said, because I'm British. And I'd never actually seen a hockey game before. What is a blocked shot? Oh, the captain said patronizingly towards me, a blocked shot is when you as a player decide to place your body between a puck traveling 100 miles an hour and the goal on the other side. That's a blocked shot. He said to me with his broken nose, a scar on his cheek, and half his teeth missing. It's a blocked shot. Blocked shots are one of the best predictors. It's like on-base percentage in baseball. One of the best predictors of your likelihood as an individual of making it in the NHL and of your likelihood as a team of outperforming other teams. So does this mean the coach just stands by and said, oh, your block shots ratio is low, better get it up? This is not what they do. The data are a prompt for a conversation between the coach and the player together, looking at videos of where they may have blocked a shot that they didn't, reflecting on that, revisiting it, thinking about future games, trying it out, looking at it again. The purpose of data is to provoke good conversations about performance and quality that benefit the individual and the community. It's not about throwing numbers at people, throwing targets at people, shoving spreadsheets or dashboards in front of people. It's about the metrics, and it's about the meaning, the conversations. It's the two of them together, not one against the other. Are you with me? So if you're a school, and most of you are, these are the things to ask about how you use data. Not those things, but these things. These are things to ask yourself. First, do you value what you measure, or do you measure what you value? Actually, you shouldn't value what you measure. You should measure what you value. What do you value, and what is your equivalent of a blocked shot or goals in overtime? What are your indicators? How would you know? Do you use one metric, or do you have a range of metrics? High-performing businesses have many metrics. High-performing sports teams have many metrics, including retail, sales, participation, viewing. They have a balanced scorecard. Too many schools have a couple of metrics, like number of kids, retention of our people, test scores, and test scores. Most schools in the use of data are like average business, big business, or bad business. They're not like the best, the highest performing businesses. We need to be like the best, not like the biggest. If you have targets for improvement, do you share them together? Develop them together? Are they yours? Do you own them? Or does somebody throw them at you from a distance? Is your data available in real time? Or does it come at the end of the year when it's too late to do anything for the kids who were reflected in the data? Do you get the data when you can use it to help the kids who are in the data? So, last but not least, as we bring all these things together, because I said I wouldn't talk about the last two, and I'm not, but here they are before your eyes, because I only have this. So there it goes, and you're not going to buy the book now. There's the bamboo, there's off it goes. So just to remind you, uplifting leadership's not being about the biggest or about being top. It's about who you are, who you want to be, and pursuing that with relentless determination. Uplifting leadership's about not going with the herd, but going against the grain, having confidence in what you're doing and be able to follow that path. Uplifting leadership's about collaborating with your competitors, not win-lose competition or the only one left alive. Uplifting leadership's about pulling change and pushing it. It's about using metrics, but using them meaningfully. And it's about sustainable growth. Uplifting leadership is about behavior. It's emotional. It's spiritual. And it's about other people's quality of life and opportunities. And if we go back 50 years to this city, to just a short distance away, beside a reflecting pool, we should all remember the words of Martin Luther King. All labor and all leadership that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming. Good luck for the rest of the conference.